Kate, for the past several years, you have led leadership positions in international development organizations, providing financial services and access to education to millions of the world's poorest citizens. You've served as Chief Operating Officer for Vitana and later served as a consultant and board member. Prior to that, you have held a range of executive roles. You hold a BA from Stanford University and an MBA from UCLA's Anderson School of Management. Currently, you are the CEO of Upaya Social Ventures. Thank you so much, Kate, for taking out the time to have this discussion with me around impact investing, microfinance, and the role that Upaya has been playing in solving one of the world's greatest challenges.
Thank you, Anusha. I'm delighted to be here.
So to get started, historically, there has been a common misconception that profits and positive impact on society are mutually exclusive. To a large degree, this is because of the current global capitalism structure, including the investment sector that prioritizes profits over people and the planet, right? Today, that view is still pretty pervasive, and there's capitalism and making money on one side and philanthropy on the other. But what I see is that in part, the younger generation, the coming generations are seeing this false dichotomy. So the work that Upaya has been doing over the past few years is interesting. In fact, in a way, a proof of concept of impact investing. Upaya has invested in 26 businesses that have created over 25,000 jobs for the extreme poor and has improved over 200,000 lives. So my first question to you is that what has been the motivation behind setting up Upaya, and what is Upaya's investment model?
Sure. And first of all, I just want to echo everything you said. I think that there was a false dichotomy for a long time, and some very prominent scholars saying that the firm should not be concerned about social impact, and that has been fading away for the last 30 years or so. I think microfinance really demonstrated that there could be a profitable company that also had social benefit. Mm-hmm. And I go back that far because Upaya's roots are in microfinance. And for anyone listening who's not familiar, microfinance is a form of banking for the poor. It was created by a few different people, but most notably Muhammad Yunus with the Grameen Bank. And what he demonstrated was that there was a way to recycle capital, a way to actually earn some premium, some profit, and have dramatic impacts on the lives of the poor. And I think that shifted thinking so that other people started asking, are there other market-oriented ways that we could more scalably improve the lives of the poor? And impact investing covers a range of issues. I've been focused on poverty since 2003, so that's my area. But what microfinance did was provide access to small loans to create micro enterprises. Mm-hmm. What Upaya does is it recognizes there are some people who are too poor, too vulnerable to take out a loan. And in fact, as an organization, we've got our roots in Unitas, which was a microfinance organization. And the co-founders of Upaya were looking at this question saying, how do you reach people who are too vulnerable for microfinance? And they were studying that question and looking at best programs. And they hit on this idea that actually, if you can find sustainable businesses, small and growing businesses that will create reliable and dignified jobs for the poor, that is a sustainable and scalable way to fight extreme poverty. And so Upaya was launched actually exactly 10 years ago with that premise that we could invest in these businesses and help them move from their early stage to a more mature, solid, sustainable stage, get our money back, maybe even get a little profit, which we could then invest in the next business, and in the process create jobs. And as you said, right now we're at 26 businesses invested and 25,000 jobs created.
Yeah, right. You mentioned that developing profits and then reinvesting those profits into other businesses. So with relation to that, why does Upaya feel a need to make these multiple investments?
Because the scale of the problem that we are tackling is enormous. Before COVID, the estimates were about 750 million people living in extreme poverty. And the extreme poverty metric that we use is the World Bank's $1.90 a day. That's huge.
Yeah.
We invest in companies that we want to see create 1,000 jobs.
Yeah.
Obviously against the numbers we're looking at, we are looking to see how many investments we can make, and we're constrained by our own capital. So recycling the capital amplifies our impact.
In one of your articles, you talk about the new frontier of impact investing, which lies in being able to talk in comparable and concrete terms about the level of impact that's being created. So, how does Upaya specifically measure the impact, and what are the tools or indicators that Upaya uses to assess their social outcomes?
Yeah. So I think that it has always been a challenge for our industry that every organization defines their impact with different metrics, which can make it very hard to assess the relative efficacy of different approaches.
Yeah.
Since we were founded in 2011, our North Star has been number of jobs created, but we don't stop at that. We then look at the quality of these jobs. What level of income improvement is the job holder seeing? And then what level of lifestyle improvements are they able to receive because of the additional income? And so we ask about the quality of their housing. We ask if they're sending their children to school. We ask, what is the first thing that you're going to buy with your increased income? Very often that is a mobile phone. So we have a standard survey that we've actually done from the very first investment. And we have quite a data repository now, which we mine to ask ourselves questions about which industries, which sectors should we be investing more in because they're creating better jobs. Now, the article that I wrote about is that it's great for Upaya to look at this. It would be even better for us to look at what our colleagues are doing and find out, oh, are you doing something that's even more effective with metrics that we can compare against? And there are efforts in the industry. The GIN has just come out with a new framework called the Compass framework that we align to, all with this goal of wanting to have apples to apples comparison across the industry.
Right. Upaya has also been working on integrating innovative ideas and tools such as the Recoverable grant pool to help build on traditional philanthropy. So help me understand how this helps to plug gaps in market-based economies and in benefiting those who otherwise may be left behind.
Yeah, so let me first explain what a recoverable grant is. It's not very complicated, but it goes against, I think, our normal assumptions about philanthropy versus investment. They're very different things.
Yeah.
So philanthropy is a gift, and it's a gift that is given with no expectation of a return. And then investment, of course, is an expectation of I'm going to get my money back and hopefully something more. A recoverable grant kind of splits the difference. It is a grant from a philanthropist who wants to see impact created, but also if certain triggers are met, and they can be positive or negative, wants to get their money back and maybe even a little return. So then it turns into like a loan.
Yeah.
In our case, we have recoverable grants from 6 foundations or donor advised funds with, that individuals have, where they have committed $1 million to us to make these investments.
Yeah.
If the investments do well and we get our money back, then we pay the donors back. If they do really well, we'll pay the donors back up to 5% beyond their original grant.
Okay.
And your question about how does this fill a gap? How does this change things? What I have found with raising philanthropic capital is the world is full of wonderful philanthropists, but the world is full of even more wonderful causes. And it can be very hard to raise philanthropy. And because we can go to our donors and say, if you participate in what we call the pool of recoverable grants, if this works the way we expect it to, you'll get your money back. You can make a grant to somebody else. So you can create dignified jobs in India in 2021. And in 2026, maybe use that grant to distribute solar lanterns in Kenya.
Yeah.
And so I think it really, again, it amplifies the resources available to do this work.
So investors, they usually shy away from making impact investments because they're often aren't able to see a tangible link between what their capital is doing and what the actual outcome is, right? And so how is it that impact can be made more tangible for investors in the impact investing space? And how is Upaya tackling that particular aspect?
Yeah, that has been, the challenge of our industry for decades. I think we're making progress.
Yeah.
And a key part of that is this industry effort to get apples to apples comparison.
Mhm.
We have moved from, oh, the concept of impact is good enough,
Yeah.
to realizing, no, it isn't. You need to have proof points.
Mhm.
And then, the proof points were more about outputs, like, if Upaya just talked about number of jobs,
Yeah.
and there's now a deepening of like, no, we need to understand, are we really changing the situation for people? Is their income improving? And getting more data about that. I'm seeing across the industry that organizations like mine are getting more sophisticated and are investing in more data about whether what they are trying to do is actually matter. For us, we're a relatively small organization. We have 12 people on staff, but we have 3 people who spend a good amount of their time just working on impact management,
Yeah.
which shows, the relative importance of it to us. And for me, part of it is absolutely helping our supporters see the tangible impact of what their money is being used for.
Yeah.
But just as important is it feeds our program model. It tells us investing in this kind of a company leads to this kind of impact. Should we double down or should we move to a different sector? And I think that sometimes gets lost. Some
Yeah.
organizations feel like, oh, well, I have to do this impact work so that we can tell the donors, we can tell the investors. That's really only part of the story. You should be doing it so that you're better at your job.
So coming back to a little bit about microfinance, which is the model that Upaya is sort of based on, right? So with the rise of impact investing, microfinance as an industry, it seems to be bouncing back with a lot of organizations and social ventures beginning to find ways to address global issues such as poverty and unemployment by financially supporting early stage entrepreneurs, just the way that Upaya has been doing, right? So, with relation to that, where do you see the intersection between microfinance and impact investing in the current times? And is there something that microfinance institutions today are doing differently to encourage impact investing?
Yeah, and one thing that I'll clarify a little bit, I don't think of Upaya as being a microfinance organization. We were inspired by the gaps
Yeah.
in the microfinance industry. And, when it got its start, it was this notion of, small loans for the poor to create micro enterprises.
Yeah.
As an industry, it now spans capital access for a much wider range of activities,
Yeah.
certainly still micro entrepreneurs, also housing for the poor, also small and medium enterprises. And that's, the kind of work we do. And I really believe that financial inclusion and financial access are not the only answer to poverty, but they are a key part of that.
Yeah.
That by connecting people to the economic system where their own hard work can be rewarded
Yeah.
is very important, and making sure that that system is distributing the rewards fairly, which
Right.
I think that we as a globe have some work to do on. But that's where I see us moving in the right direction in terms of um, so much financial inclusion work, so much you know lending programs that are available to people who don't have collateral, using new kinds of technology to be able to do credit checks on people. Um, Debt has risks, and we need to protect consumers that way. But I think that all of this, well regulated, can lead to a more inclusive economy.
With the microfinance industry or microfinance in general just gaining popularity in the 1900s and losing popularity in the 2000s, can we see impact investing avoiding the failures of microfinance?
It's a great question. And I'd say that, when we talk about it sort of was everybody's darling in, the
Yeah,
1990s and the early 2000s, and people talked about it as a silver bullet. And I'll say that, for many of us in the industry, we were saying this is not a silver bullet.
yeah,
But nonetheless, it did take on, almost cult-like status, especially when Muhammad Yunus, won the Nobel Peace
yeah,
Prize in 2006. I think a lot of money got into the space very, very quickly before there were consumer protections in place, before regulation really understood how to handle this industry. It just grew very, very quickly,
yeah,
and so I think that I'm not. I'm a fan of good regulation,
yeah,
especially for consumer population that is more vulnerable.
mm,
And I think that's very, very important. And I think, when you broaden out impact investing generally, I think it's very important that if your goal is to have social impact and financial return, you have to have a lot of clarity about how you balance those two things.
yeah,
There are investors out there who absolutely have a viable path to say, I'm not going to sacrifice financial impact, but I want to see the social impact.
yeah,
There are deals and funds where that works.
yeah,
Where we sit at Upaya, we are very comfortable saying, if we had a huge financial win
mhm,
that did not create a meaningful number of jobs for the poor, we have completely failed.
right,
And if we have an investment that creates 100,000 sustainable jobs for the poor, but for whatever reason does not return to us,
yeah,
that's a win.
yeah.
And so I think as investors, you need to be very clear where you see those trade-offs.
My last question to you would be, what, according to you, what are your thoughts on the impact investing space, the rise of impact investing in the recent years, and how do you think that economies in general can help boost social impact investing?
I think the amount of capital swirling through our global economy is
Mm,
massive. And if we can redeploy some of that and focus it on enterprises and activities that are going to create a net good for the planet, for the people, that is a great thing. I think having individuals more conscious of
yeah,
how their own money is being used, I
mm,
think is a very good thing.
yeah,
I think that as an industry, we do need to continue down this path of getting clearer and clearer about what impact is.
yeah,
Because if we don't define it clearly, others will define it for us, and it can be very muddy, and that can lead to disappointment, I think. But I do think the industry is doing a good job. That there's an impact management project. Lots of people are having the same conversation of we want to make sure that we're delivering on the impact that is the promise of impact investing.
right. Thank you so much, Kate.